This is an extraordinary moment for all of us here today. Let me just start by making some introductory comments and some thank yous. To begin with, let me be clear. This is, as you know, a nonpartisan movement intended to address the independence of our judiciary and the safety of our judicial officers and the importance of our justice system. Never before, in my view, in this country has our justice system played a more vital role in our democracy than it does today. We are really honored to have an extraordinary group of incredible speakers lined up for today, not the least of which is our most valuable treasure in the judicial system, and that is Justice Anthony Kennedy. Justice Kennedy has been retired since 2018, actually, since 2018, but he joined the Ninth Circuit in 1975 and joined the U.S. Supreme Court in 1988, serving for literally 30 years plus as a justice of our U.S. Supreme Court. There are only two living Supreme Court justices, Justice Kennedy and Justice Pryor, who retired in 2022. Justice Kennedy is going to start our remarks today and go beyond that, but we have a number of other individuals who are going to be speaking. Top of the program is going to be Justice Kennedy. At the bottom of the program, but not last but not least, is going to be Justice Richard Goldstone, who is truly a legend. Justice Goldstone has a story to tell you about his life and work in South Africa, where he was originally appointed as one of only 8 judges out of 200 in the apartheid regime of South Africa. And when he joined the bench, he wondered how the apartheid regime, who knew he was opposed to them, would respond to his orders if they were not in line with what the apartheid regime wanted. And to his encouragement and to South Africa's benefit, when he issued decisions adverse to the apartheid regime, they followed his decisions and the rule of law in South Africa. And I'll have Justice Goldstone tell you more about himself. We are honored to have Judge Saldivia, who is a Venezuelan federal court judge who has a very scary, remarkable, and important story to tell you about what life was like in Venezuela and why in 2014 he had to flee the country and the circumstances behind his flight. And then we have Judge Zabłudowska, who is coming to us from Poland. I wanted to start by saying good morning, California, good afternoon, Washington, and good evening, Poland and South Africa, because it is evening there. And Judge Zabłudowska serves as a judge in Poland, where their judicial system has been under stress for the better part of 10 years. And on our website, Speak Up for Justice, you'll see an incredible documentary entitled The March of 1,000 Robes, where 1,000 judges from across Europe came together in January of 2020 to speak to the benefit for the purpose of speaking for the Polish judicial system. And Judge Zabłudowska will talk more about that. And finally, Justice Goldstone will wrap it up for us. That'll be our first 30. When we're done with the first 30, we're going to have a dynamic dialogue about issues that are currently happening today, about our judicial system, about its interaction with the executive branch and the legislative branch. Justice Kennedy will not weigh in on that because many of these issues may well go before the U.S. Supreme Court. So Justice Kennedy will not engage in that part of the discussion, but otherwise we'll have a combined discussion. We have Judge Bloom, who is a remarkable member of our Speak Up for Justice campaign, and Judge Bloom will be a part of the dialogue that will be moderated by Judge Salas. Finally, I want to thank Judge Leo Gordon, who is president-elect of the Federal Judges Association. He can't be with us today, but he's been a very important, instrumental part of the organization structure that we put together here. And Carl Sandstrom. Carl is an attorney who's working directly and closely with us as these programs have gone forward. Our next program, I'll say this again, will be July 31st. With that said, I want to kick off the program and introduce our treasure in the legal community, Justice Anthony Kennedy. Justice Kennedy, take it away, sir.
Well, good morning and good evening to all, and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much for presiding and for doing so much for this panel, which is of tremendous importance today. Today, the world is celebrating what looks like, what we hope might be peace for a period of time in the Middle East. Why is it that we're asking people to tune in about judges? Nothing could be more relevant at this time. The reason is this: peace gives us the opportunity to pursue freedom. Peace gives us the opportunity to pursue democracy within our own times in order to keep the peace. And so if you think, why are we talking about judges at a time when the world stage is interested in the conflict between great international powers? And again, the reason is that ultimately those contexts must be solved by a social discourse. And that social discourse must be dignified, it must be decent, and it must be characterized by civility. This is what judges stand for. As we speak here today, we have hundreds of judges in the United States and in the rest of the world. Some who are in public on the bench making decisions, others who are studying in their chambers in order to write decisions. And what are they doing? They are speaking first to themselves, and then to the parties, and then to the public, and then to the world at law in a civil, decent way. And this is how judges are best protected, when the public and our nation realize how central they are to our discourse. Now, judges aren't the only ones who seek to have a civil discourse and who are thoughtful, rational, probing, fair, decent in the way they have their discourse with others and with the way they have disagreements with others. Judges are not alone in that. Many of our thoughtful and dedicated citizens are committed to a civil dialogue. But the dialogue is of tremendous importance because the rest of the world, many in the rest of the world, look to the United States to see what democracy is, to see what democracy ought to be. And if they see a hostile, fractious discourse, if they see a discourse that uses identity politics rather than to talk about issues, democracy is at risk. Freedom's at risk. Aristotle said that freedom can die. And he was right. Aristotle said that democracy can die. He is right. Democracy doesn't live on automatic pilot. You don't take a DNA test to see if you believe in freedom. Freedom and democracy are taught, and teaching is a conscious act. And that's what our judges do. We're talking about protection of judges. And of course, there are some very, very standard provisions. Judges must have protection for themselves and their families. Our families are often included in threats. And that's one thing. But another way judges protect themselves is by showing to the public, to the world at large, that they are engaged day in and day out in this process of resolving disputes in a civil, decent way. It's interesting, Richard Goldstone may have a comment on this and may agree. He's a great hero of mine. It's been interesting to me to know that we can make friends when we disagree. If we disagree in a thoughtful, courteous, respectful way, where we respect the dignity of the other person, even though we disagree with his or her ideas, this is what democracy is all about. We should be concerned in this country about, as I've already indicated, the the tone of our political discourse. Identity politics are used so that a person is characterized by his or her partisan affiliation. That's not what democracy and civil discourse is about. What democracy and civil discourse are about are taking issues and discussing them. And this is what judges do. And this is why judges are of central importance. They're not the only ones that do this. People all over in many professions and in many callings seek to promote civility. But for judges, we do so in a formal way. Judges must always ask themselves, why am I doing this? The first lines of Hamlet are, who goes there? And Hamlet throughout the play asks, who am I? Judges must do this. Why am I about to make this decision? What are the motives? What are the hidden instincts that are impelling me to this decision that I have not yet articulated? This is the duty of judging. This is the fascination of judging. One of the fascinations of being a justice is that you learn about yourself. You learn who you are. We have a constitution in the United States with a capital C. Most countries in the world talk about their constitution, and they do it with a small c, which means the sum total of their ethics, their customs, their history. And we have that's our constitution with a small c. Our constitution with a big C is the one we usually think of when we talk about the Constitution. The Constitution that was drafted in 1787, ratified in 1789. Which defines us as a people. My hope is that the schools, we were talking about civics, more often will give the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence to, let's say fourth graders and on. When we talk about civics, a young man who was living across the street from us, who was going to high school a couple of years ago, came and said, "Oh, I'm in my senior year. All I have is civics and driver's ed." No. Civics is something that you learn about throughout your life, throughout your school career. And we should give the Constitution to young people and tell them, number one, if you read the whole Constitution, you'll fall asleep. It'll take you 2 hours, at least, probably 3. But read the preface. Read the beautiful preface. It begins and ends with the same phrase, the United States, we the people of the United States. Then it goes on, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States. And then give them as well the Declaration of Independence. That you can read in about under 10 minutes. And the more you read it, the madder you get at King George. And it tells you a lot about our history, about the purpose of who we are. And the purpose of who we are, the purpose of this nation, is to preserve freedom and to enhance freedom for ourselves and for generations to come. And that is what judges do day in and day out. And that's why at this time, when we are celebrating peace, it's so important for us to remember that this is the opportunity. Peace is what gives us the opportunity to make democracy stronger, to make freedom more attainable, to make freedom greater for ourselves and the rest of the world. We must always say no to tyranny and yes to truth.
Wow, Justice Kennedy, I cannot thank you enough for those very powerful words for all of us. It inspires me to be a better lawyer and a better citizen to have you tell us that. So I'm very, very gracious for those words. Now we're going to juxtapose that with Judge Saldivia, who fled Venezuela in 2014 and has a very compelling personal story to tell, but I'll tell all of you listening today and tomorrow. These are words you must take in and understand and appreciate. and respond to. So, Judge Saldivia, you have a hard act to follow after Justice Kennedy, but it's all yours. Go.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I still remember that phone call from Vice President of Venezuela, Aristóbulo Isturiz. He says, reverse your rulings or face that consequence. That was the moment I knew I had to cross the line. Isturi was the governor of my state in Venezuela. Later, he became in Venezuela's vice president. The collapse of Venezuela judiciary is not just a personal story. It's a warning about how democracy can die through legal means. Dictatorship in Venezuela didn't arrive with tanks. It came dressed in judges' robes. I witnessed this transformation from inside the system. What followed is a chronological account of how Venezuela judiciary fell under authoritarian rule. In 1999, Venezuela adopted a new constitution. Then, in 2000, Congress established a judicial emergency commission. Sounds official, right? But it wasn't about reform. It was about control. This commission was supposed to clean up corruption. Then, Congress was granted sweeping authority to dismiss judges without due process. Over 60% of the judges were fired without a hearing. Many were replaced by provisional judges with no job security. These replacements operate under a permanent threat of dismissal, making them easy to manipulate and political dependent. I mean, loyalist to the regime. In 2004, the National Assembly enacting a court-packing reform, expanding the Supreme Court from 20 to 32 justices. These new seats were filled by party loyalists using a simple majority vote. These destroy even the appearance of impartiality. The same year, the assassination of the prosecutor Danilo Anderson sent shockwave to the legal community. Rather than conducting a transparent investigation, the regime used his death to fabricate a political narrative against the judiciary. It was a chilling sign. The justice system had become a weapon, not a shield. The Attorney General office also became a political weapon. Attorney General Luis Ortega often appeared on national television to intimidate prosecutors, citizens, public officers, and political figures who dared to dissent. The message in that moment was clear: fear and punishment. In 2009 came the moment of judicial terror, the case of Judge Maria Fiuni, when she ruled in full compliance with Venezuela law and the United Nations request to release a political prisoner who had been held without trial for 4 years. Within hours of her ruling, President Chavez appeared on national television, branding her a traitor and calling for her imprisonment. She was arrested. In prison, she was raped, tortured, and kept in solitary. Her case became a symbol, the Fiuni effect, a climate of fear so intense that it silenced the entire judiciary. Then, in 2014, this repression reached my doorstep. During nationwide anti-government protest, I released a student protester who had been unlawfully arrested and ordered an investigation against high-ranking officers for the death of some detainees in police custody. After issuing those decisions, I received a direct phone call from Vice President Isturiz. He demanded that I reverse my ruling and warned me of severe consequences. I refused, and I told him, my boss is the Constitution and the rule of the law, not any political power. After that, my protection disappeared. Armed civilian militias loyal to the regime began surveilling me. I was followed, filmed, and harassed. State Congress Speaker Nelson Moreno also joined in on the threat. My courthouse was soon under attack. The Chief Justice of my state called me into her chamber and told me point blank, you are on your own. Friends in the Supreme Court called to warn me. They are coming for you. I knew I have no choice. I left behind my career and my country, not because I broke the law, but because I upheld it. It was no longer safe for me. Many judges fled, others went silent, and some confirmed. The legal community fractured under the wave of fear and complicity. What happened in Venezuela was a deliberate strategy to silence independent voices, politicize appointments, and intimidate the judiciary into submission. The destruction of the judicial independence was slow and calculated, achieved not through military forces, but through laws, decrees, executive orders, and courts that no longer serve the people of Venezuela. With Chavez acting as a chief architect of the negative PR machine against us. I'm not here to tell you about Venezuela. I'm here to warn you. This can happen anywhere. The balance of power begins to tilt and judicial integrity is undermined. Signs are always subtle. Disciplinary actions used as a threat, judge punished for their rulings, and court filled with political loyalists. And soon the judiciary becomes a tool of darkness. I lost my country, but I know my conviction. I speak to you now, not only as a witness to Venezuela's fall, but as a voice for vigilance. This is why I'm here today, to speak up in a hope that one of you will hear my message. Democracy doesn't die overnight. It begins with silence, inside courtrooms, behind closed doors, and then within the minds of those who knows better but say nothing. Thank you.
Wow. I can't tell you how moving those remarks are and how important they are for everyone to hear. And I appreciate your courage in stepping forward, because I know this is not an easy story for you to tell and brings up a lot of emotions for you at the same time. And it's a good lead in for Judge Zabłudowska as she is negotiating the world of Poland. And so if you could share with everyone here in this country and abroad, what's happening in Poland and what your life has been like.
Well, wow, I would say after what Judge Saldivia said, actually, because it is quite a story, and mine is not that dramatic, and I thank God for that, I think. I will speak rather not about dates or facts, because it's too much for 5 minutes. I would like to speak a bit about the mechanisms of things that happen in Poland, and because they are common to all places where autocratic attack states take place. So rule of law has safeguards, and every system has its own. And in Poland, from 2015 to 2023, these safeguards were systematically turned off, because you cannot assume full power if someone controls you. So the sequence was that they took over, I mean, the political party that gained elections, that won elections in 2015, quite legally and quite democratically. They started with the constitutional tribunal so that it could not control the bad law that they made. Then they submitted to the government the prosecutor's office. And the Minister of Justice became the prosecutor general. yet again. They took over the public media so that there would be one mainstream propaganda channel. They took over the Supreme Court and they took over the National Council of Judiciary, which is a very important body because it's responsible for all judicial nominations and all judicial promotions. So basically, after the change, 23 out of 25 members of the council were elected by the political power, which turned it totally politically dependent and not recognized as our constitutional council anymore. And then they came for the courts. The courts were called the last barricade by the leader of the political party. And they were very annoying because, you know, they overturned prosecutors' decisions. They would acquit people who were demonstrating against the government, and they would not listen to what the members of the party were saying on the media. And they are annoying for two reasons. First of all, because they are the controller in the checks and balances. So they control the government, they control the legislature, but also they are the shield. So once you get rid of the courts, just as Judge Saldivia was saying, then you have the people to your mercy because there is no one to protect them. And that's why they were so important. So we had very many attacks on the judges, starting with a smear campaign with billboards saying how judges are corrupt and thieves and they should be disciplined. Then we had a special disciplinary system created for the judges, and basically all the judges that were vocal against the changes were disciplined one way or another. I had 2 disciplinary cases, for example. Some of the judges got suspended for their judicial decisions, and there were attempts of criminal investigations against judges. And what could we do to defend ourselves? One sentence that Judge Saldivia said resounded very deeply in my heart. It was, "You are on your own." So it is so important that you are not on your own, because every judge in Poland who was harassed, who was disciplined, had a wall of people behind them. And it was so important. The society recognized that the courts are not for the judges or for the government. They belong to the people. And that's why they stood up to defend the courts. So we had the cooperation with the legal environment, because lawyers would accompany judges to all the disciplinary cases. Also, we had the support of the people, and we had the support of international organizations and international institutions like the European Council or the Court of Justice of the European Union. And these defenses made us strong, because the Polish Judges Association Justitia, that was the leader of this resistance movement, you could say, became the voice of the judges that they wouldn't otherwise have, because we didn't have the council anymore. And thanks to all those combined actions, we managed to save the independence of our courts. But our system was pretty much destroyed over these 8 years. So now we are facing a very hard process of reconstruction, and I don't believe it will be possible to complete that. To give you just one example, and I will finish with this. 3,000 judges out of 10,000 are improperly nominated because of the faults with the council. And the chamber of the Supreme Court, that is supposed to control the presidential elections that we just had, is actually not recognized as a court anymore. So this is a huge crisis, and well, it will be very difficult to find a way out. So my final word would be, you have to speak out at every stage, because every safeguard is invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those words, Judge Zabłudowska. And look, the operative communication here is we need to speak up. We need to speak out. We need to have our voices heard. And Karen Burgess, you came on a little late for us, but Karen is the former immediate past president of the International Academy of Trial Lawyers. Before we end with Justice Goldstone, what I want to talk to you about, Karen, what does the international legal community have to do with the rule of law? How does it affect you and your practice and your clients?
Well, the international community needs to speak up. One of my last duties as outgoing president of the International Academy of Trial Lawyers was to partner with our chair of international relations to put on a meeting to protect and promote the rule of law. She's a human rights lawyer from Amsterdam, and her grandmother and mother were interned in World War II. In March, when we were doing this planning, she told me that she was no longer willing to come to the US, and she wasn't the only one. We landed on a hybrid virtual meeting structure so that lawyers from around the world could attend. And the chair decided to come in person after all. And the day before she and I met to plan, and I saw this as a brainstorm session about actions that we could take to help lawyers around the globe. She stopped me. She said, "No, Karen, you've got it all wrong. We have the rule of law. You are losing it in the US. We are supporting you." And that was really eye-opening to me. Of course, attacks on the rule of law are nothing new. Even the Nazis targeted Jewish lawyers first, and they stripped them of their licenses. And they certainly aren't sudden. Suzanne Spalding, who's the former Homeland Security Undersecretary and the current head of the Center for Strategic International Studies, told us 5 years ago about Russia's disinformation campaign. She said, if Putin can undermine a significant segment of the population's willingness to accept a court's decision, he can cause chaos in this country. And now Pravda, which is the Kremlin's propaganda arm, is flooding the internet with content, 3.6 million articles in 2024 alone to influence language learning models that power AI chatbots. A recent study found that the top 10 chatbots repeated pro-Russian falsehoods 33% of the time. So they're creating a disinformation machine where our own technology amplifies their lies, and it's working. Many people, they don't understand why the policies of the president that they voted for aren't just automatically permissible. But we've gutted civics education, as you said, Justice Kennedy, and these intentional efforts from state actors. You can completely understand why people don't understand themselves the importance of checks and balances. Meanwhile, when they disagree with a decision, our leaders who are sworn to uphold our Constitution call for the impeachment of judges or worse. And judges, the general population here in the US doesn't know that your codes of conduct prohibit you from speaking out to protect yourselves. Starting in March of this year, the US administration issued executive orders targeting major law firms for taking positions it disagreed with by, among other things, suspending security clearances, even for military reservists who are working at the firms, terminating government contracts with them, limiting access to government buildings and government employees. Many firms made deals with the administration, collectively agreeing to provide $1 billion in free work to further the administration's interests. Others stood strong. They made the brave choice to trust the courts to right this wrong. In her opinion, in joining the executive order against Perkins Coie, Judge Howe started with the famous Shakespearean reference about killing all the lawyers, which was actually a ploy to allow an autocrat to take over. It's one of Paul's favorite sayings. And then she continued by quoting you, Justice Kennedy. She said, Congress may legislate, the president may implement, and courts may adjudicate, but only the lawyers can prepare and submit the great issues of human justice under law in such a manner that courts in the ultimate may be effective. And Cohen versus Hurley, absent their crucial independence, lawyers would become nothing more than parrots of the views of whatever group wields governmental power at the moment. Judge Howe then, she loops back and she says, in a cringeworthy twist on the theatrical phrase, the executive order takes the approach of let's kill all the lawyers I don't like, sending the clear message, lawyers must stick to the party line or else. The American Bar Association is under attack too. So we as lawyers, we have a crucial responsibility to support each other and to support you annoying judges from both. So Zabłudowski, to support each other, to support judges, because you all can't support yourselves. We need to think globally, but we've got to get to work locally. The US has 1.3 million lawyers right here, and only a fraction are in big law or in big cities. But every community in America that has a courthouse has lawyers. We're working together. We're supporting our brothers and sisters in big law, fired from the Department of Justice or in impact litigation, who are targeted for taking positions. We participate in each other's projects. We rally like on Law Day. And perhaps most of all, we must be public, full-throated voices of reason and defenders of the rule of law, because we have the ears of our community. We have our clients, both individuals and businesses, our churches, our civic organization, our social clubs, and we need to use our voices every day to be the trusted source to tell them why the third branch matters, because the remedy for a decision that you don't like is an appeal. And if you don't like that, the founders even gave us a way to amend the Constitution itself. Now, lawyers, we're finally taking our carefully crafted statements out of the echo chamber and into the world. Social media can really fuel that. And we cannot dismiss rhetoric as a tool, because the enemies of the rule of law certainly don't. Judges, your judicial courage, absolutely inspiring. It should inspire every citizen and every person around the globe. So should the courage of lawyers who are protecting the right to advocate for unpopular decisions. We want to live up to your call, Justice Kennedy, to prepare and submit the great issues of human justice so courts can be effective. I'm just delighted to be here. Thank you so much for your work.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Karen. That was spectacular. And last but not least, another legend in the legal community, Justice Richard Goldstone. Justice Goldstone, everyone's bio is on the Speak Up for Justice website. And Justice Goldstone, I looked at your bio. It took me maybe 2 hours to read through your Wikipedia page. So I'm just say this. You joined the bench in 1980, and you were asked by Nelson Mandela in 1994 to be one of 11 constitutional justices at the top of the judicial system in South Africa. You retired in 2002 as a young man. Justice Kennedy went a little bit longer, and you're just a few years younger than Justice Kennedy. But my father-in-law is 91 when he retired. He's 96 today and is a young man. So we need you, and thank you. And Justice Goldstone, take it away, sir.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Paul, for inviting me to participate in this important discussion. Let me begin by saying that in too many democracies today, there is a declining respect for the rule of law and an increase in right-wing populism and undermining of judicial independence. This includes the United States and threatens its leadership of the democratic world. The rule of law is the foundation of democracy. It is the principle that requires that all institutions in a state and all who live in it be accountable to and governed by the law. The rule of law cannot operate without an independent judiciary that is respected by the other two branches of government, the executive and the legislative. If public trust and confidence in the judiciary is weakened, the democratic system is threatened. It is ironic that in South Africa, the oppressive and racist apartheid government respected the independence of its judges. Politically, it could afford to do so. The judges were all white and all male, and a great majority of them were supportive of the apartheid system. And there was an all-powerful legislature. However, when on occasion the judges found against the government, their decisions and orders were largely respected and implemented. During the late 1970s and through the 1980s, the apartheid regime came under increasing attack from the international community, and in particular from the United States. The government tried to soften that opposition and the implementation of sanctions by appointing some anti-apartheid lawyers as judges and boasting of its independent judiciary. I was one of those judges. It was a difficult decision whether to help give some respectability to the then government. However, we saw this as an opportunity to fight the system from within, and we were able to put an end to some of the worst features of the oppressive apartheid system. In 1981, for example, I gave an interpretation to legislation that effectively brought an end to residential segregation in our cities. The decisions of other colleagues set aside the draconian and inhuman policies that kept Black families from living together in our cities. We had an all-powerful legislature and no constitution, let alone a Bill of Rights. Those judgments could have been overturned by legislation the following day, but the government decided for political reasons that it should not be seen to question the authority of the judges. When apartheid ended, South Africa became a constitutional democracy with a constitution, as Justice Kennedy would say, with an uppercase C. It was founded on the rule of law. It enshrined the independence of the judiciary. A new constitutional court was established, and its first 11 members, appointed by Nelson Mandela, included some of the progressive judges appointed during the apartheid era. I was privileged to be one of them. That court has not hesitated to rule against government at all levels, and its decisions have been respected and implemented. When it first ruled against the government of Nelson Mandela, his reaction was swift and firm. He said that the court was doing what it was supposed to do, and its decisions would be respected. That policy has continued by his successors. Last Friday, we celebrated the 30th anniversary of our Constitutional Court. The celebration was attended by the leaders of both houses of Parliament, by former presidents. President Ramaphosa, in his keynote address, said that the independence of the judiciary needs to be further reinforced, and especially its financial independence. For many years, the United States played an important role in fostering the rule of law in South Africa. Many of our judges, and again I was privileged to be one of them, were inspired by the civil rights movement and the role that judges played in applying the rule of law, and especially the decisions of some remarkably courageous Southern federal judges. The American Bar Association conducted programs in South Africa that nurtured the skills of young Black lawyers. They brought judges like Nathaniel Jones and Thelton Henderson to our country, and they inspired and were role models for those young lawyers. Some of them are now judges. The Aspen Institute brought young South African judges to meet with United States judges and human rights lawyers. It was at such a meeting in Mobile, Alabama in 1984 that I was privileged to meet Justice Kennedy. Our friendship has continued over the succeeding 41 years. The influence of the United States in countries that are now placing the rule of law in jeopardy has been severely weakened by the present administration in Washington. There have been personal attacks on the independence of some judges who have ruled against the administration. Those judges have carried out their solemn duties and complied with their oaths of office. Judges are no means always correct in their decisions, but as Chief Justice John Roberts recently pointed out, the only remedy is an appeal and not ad hominem attacks on the judges. Let me end these brief remarks by expressing the hope that the rule of law will continue to be protected in all democracies across the world, and that the leadership and respect that has come from the United States in the past will be reinstated. Thank you.
Amazing for that, and thank you so much. I mean, those words are prophetic and powerful. That picture right there in my office is my father in 1968 with Martin Luther King. And it's a reminder every day of what we fight for, the injustices that we're here to protect. And I want to thank everyone here for your engagement in this such an important project. Now I'm going to turn it over to Judge Salas, who's going to do the question and answer. We're a little bit behind schedule, but built in a lot of time. So we'll move fast. Judge Salas, question and answer. You're up.
Let's start with where Justice Goldstone left off, and that, of course, is Chief Justice Roberts' own warning in 2024 about illegitimate attacks against the judiciary in this country. And we have seen it. We've seen it and he said, one, violence, intimidation was the second. Boy, have we seen it with the pizza doxing and other riots. We're up to 400, got the latest number, 408 threats against judges this year. That we're going to break records, people, and not in a good way. He also talked about the spreading of disinformation. And we are seeing that spreading of disinformation coming from the top down. And sort of when we hear from Judge Zabłudowska, and when we hear from Judge Saldivia about how the disinformation was what they used, what the dictators, what the individuals used to collapse democracy there, to take over there, they used that spreading of disinformation. Judges are rogue. Sound familiar? Judges are corrupt. Sound familiar? And basically, judges are monsters. Judges hate America. We are seeing that here in the spreading of disinformation. And finally, the threats to not follow lawfully issued orders by the court. So I start with really wanting to hear from Judge Saldivia, because I think, you know, you said, I had the great privilege of hearing you give an interview. And one of the things you said was you regretted not speaking up sooner, not speaking up louder, not gathering in Venezuela. And you talked about the silence. And I wonder if you could tell us in a few moments, you know, what you think we need to be looking out for. I mean, we've talked about all the warning signs, but I asked you to just comment about the silence from your judicial colleagues in Venezuela.
Yeah, we were extremely afraid of the consequence of speak up. So, but I would do different if I have that time to not be too concerned about what is going to be the perception of the public, because we forget in Venezuela that we were part of the rule of the law. And then so we didn't speak enough louder to identify that threat against the democracy in Venezuela, against the constitution in Venezuela. Don't forget, we are the custodian of the constitutions. That's why we are here. That's why we were judges, to protect the constitution and the rule of the law. And if we are not savvy enough to identify those threats, and then be worried, we are ruling too political. We are doing something that a Congress should do. But when those other two branches are silent and complicity, so you don't have anything to do. You have to do by your own. You have to not be afraid, and then you have to speak in many conferences if you have to, and then ask for help. Because that's happened. We don't, as a human beings, sometimes we don't ask for help when we need it. And then the public perception of the judges in Venezuela was destroyed, because I said during my remarks, Hugo Chavez was acting as a chief architect of the negative PR against us. So people didn't believe us. And then we have to, we don't have to go to a rally. We can go to universities. We can do panels. We don't have to touch political issue, but we have to say, hey, the risk is real. So our constitution is under attack, because we are the judges are who interpret the law, and then we are the custodian of the rule of the law and the constitution. That's my message.
Thank you so much. And Judge Zabłudowska, I know I'm going to murder your name, and I apologize, Judge. But one of the things that I was struck when you were speaking was when people rallied together. You said you were struck by the statement, "You are on your own." The Chief Justice said to Judge Saldivia, "You're on your own." And that was the difference in Poland. That was the difference in Poland, is that the judges stuck together. The March of 1,000 Robes, right? The community, the international community descended upon Poland to defend you. And I think that I'd like to ask you what it means to have our branches of government, especially our Congress, support us. You know, threats are up in our country and funding is down. We're fighting right now. The judiciary its funding has been flattened for 2 years. If we don't get the budget we need to run, we don't have a strong pillar of democracy in our third branch. So I would love to hear from you. What does it mean for Congress and for the American people and for the international community to rally with the rule of law, with the judges in this country?
Your words are very powerful, and I think that Poland was very special because the citizens recognized the importance of the judiciary at the very beginning. And I would like to have a little dispute with the word political, because as you said, we are the third pillar, so we are bound to control the political power, which means that we control the politicians. And it is very comfortable for them to say that, well, it's political, you can't be political, you should stick in your courtroom and write your verdicts. Well, at this time, it is not enough. And it is not enough to be in your courtroom, and it is not enough to be in your country. The March of the Thousand Robes happened because the parliament invented a legislation that forbade the judges to control the proper compositions of panels, because they produced so many irregular nominations that they were afraid that the system would, collapse. So they said you cannot control if your colleague was properly nominated, because if you do, you can lose your job. And that's when we decided, and we saw that it was not enough just to protest in writing or make statements or even protest, in small groups. And we decided it's time for Europe to speak up. And every single judge from Europe, some of them are watching right now, who came to the march, said that it was an extraordinary event that changed their perception of their job. That we are not clerks. We are the third power, and that comes with a huge responsibility, not only for your own courtroom and your own decisions, but also for your fellow citizens, because you are the only one who is authorized by the Constitution to control the Congress, to control the government. And that's it. And if the government doesn't like it, well, it doesn't, because it's a limit.
And I would even push gently back. I mean, I think that there's always been tensions between the branches of government in the United States, but we've always had respect for our lanes. We've always seen there to be a civil discourse.
One of the great threats to judicial independence and judicial authority is not hostility, but indifference. In Venezuela, Justice, my guess is not 1% of the people in the United States even heard about what was happening in Venezuela. You can blame the press in part for not focusing on these things, but the public must do so as well. We can't be indifferent. Now, we do go back and forth with ideas. Thoreau wrote a great essay on civil disobedience, and it was read by Gandhi when Gandhi was in Africa. Gandhi wrote about it, and what Gandhi wrote about was read by Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King wrote about it, and Mandela read what Martin Luther King wrote. So at a high level, intellectual level, there's an interest in the law, but there's not enough understanding by the people of every country of the importance of the judiciary. Judge Saldivia, I think very few people knew about what was going on in Venezuela. Very few people knew about it, and this must stop. The U.S. We have an east-west axis. If there's a taxi strike in Paris, we read about it. If something serious happens in South America, we don't seem to hear about. This we have to change.
And I agree that it's not just the indifference, it's also just the lack of true understanding. I mean, in our public, over 2/3 don't understand what our three branches of government even do. And it's our job to educate. And I know that the lawyers and the judges have made efforts to educate. The lawyers have been our champions for justice and have spoken out for when there's unfair and unjust criticism of judges. But I want to ask each of you, because we have thousands of lawyers and non-lawyers that are attending today. And after this is over, what's the takeaway? What should each of these individuals be doing right now to speak up for justice and to help preserve our democracy, obviously allow us to continue as judges to do our job, but most importantly, to preserve our system of justice and our Constitution?
Well, if I can jump in to answer the question put by Judge Bloom, I think it's very important for everybody, every citizen in a democracy, to understand what each of the branches of government are doing and what their responsibilities are, and particularly in respect of the judiciary. Judges don't give their judgments on a whim or because they want to express their personal decisions. They're bound by the law. They're bound by the Constitution. They may get it wrong, but as Chief Justice Roberts said, then it's for an appeal court to step in and put it correctly. So in the end, I think, as Justice Kennedy suggested in his opening remarks, it's a question of civility, of decency, and respect for what each branch of government is doing. If the respect is lost for one branch, that's the end of democracy and the end of the rule of law.
Would appeal. That is what, judges really want the American public to understand, which is, if indeed there is disagreement with a ruling that a judge has made, we have a wonderful constitutional framework from which anyone is free to appeal to a higher court. Let's work within the constitutional framework instead of using the divisive language and the inflammatory rhetoric accusing us of being partisan and corrupt with absolutely no basis. That is where I worry, Justice Goldstone, for democracy. Justice Kennedy, I worry about the language and the tenor and the tone that is being now just spread across all types of social media. That's the spreading of disinformation that is being repeated, and we're eroding the public's confidence, are we not?
Judges decide issues which have political consequences, but they don't decide in a political way. Now, we have to honor the fact that this judicial independence means that judges are not put on the bench so they can do as they like. They're put on the bench so they can do as they must. And one of my concerns is that partisanship plays too big a part in confirmation. Of course, Republican, Democrat has a meaning, but the Congress must focus much more on temperament, learning, background, experience, not just politics. And again, to remind the public that judges should decide political issues, but not in a political way.
This is a conversation that we could have for an entire day, and we're not going to do that. We're almost at the hour mark. This has been truly an international organization today, from our Venezuela's colleague to Poland and down to South Africa. I'll leave you with one thought. 2 days ago, the Justice Department, for the first time in U.S. history, sued 15 district court judges in Maryland because they didn't like a standing order that the Chief Justice issued in that state. The government has sued the court. Now, the problem there is usually it's the Justice Department who represents judges who get sued. And now the Justice Department is suing judges themselves. Justice Goldstone, you read about that in the New York Times, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Sure. But by the way, it's not gotten a lot of media in the United States, the fact that our judges, for the first time ever, are being sued. And Judge Saldivia, that's the start of beginning to challenge judicial independence and politicizing the court, where what's the proper methodology? It's appealing to the Fourth Circuit. That's what you do if you judge in the Fourth Circuit. You appeal, you don't sue the judges. This is going to be an ongoing dialogue for all of us. Can't thank you enough, Justice Kennedy, for doing this with us. Justice Goldstone, Justice Zabłudowska, of course, Ms. Burgess, and Judge Saldivia, Judge Bloom, and of course, last but not least, Judge Salas. Thank you all. My best. Again, we'll do this again.
Thank you.
Thank you.